On Headstrong, we are very pleased and proud to be partnered with the CBD brand, The Good Level. Now, I've been taking CBD for about 18 months to maintain my mental well-being, but it's been very difficult to find a brand that I can trust because there's so many faceless foreign brands out there and you're not sure what you're buying or how it's sourced. Luckily, I found two guys, Joe and Johnny, who have created this wonderful brand called The Good Level. What's so great about these guys is that they support British farming. Many brands import their CBD from America, but The Good Level say they don't rely on the methods by farmers that they've never met, nor the farms that they've never seen. They have a really close relationship with their farmers who are in Somerset, meaning they know how their product is produced from start to finish. They're the first CBD company I found who put a face on the brand, and they're transparent with the whole process of how they create their products. And they've even got their own podcast where they look at the latest research on CBD. To check them out, go to their Instagram at the.good.level and drop them a message if you want to find out more about CBD. And for 15% off their products, use Headstrong15 on their website for checkout. A very good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon to you, and thank you for tuning in to Headstrong. My name is Louis Strong, and I host this show. Now, if this is your first time tuning in because you are a fan of my guest this week, Headstrong is a podcast where I sit down with people in the public eye to talk to them about their lives and their careers and have a really engaging and interesting conversation with them to understand what the word headstrong means to them. On this week's episode of Headstrong, I am joined by a wonderful actor called Alistair Petrie. Now, I'd never met Alistair before, but we shared a couple of mutual friends, and I really wanted to get him onto the show because not only has he had a really, really interesting acting career, but he's also a wonderful activist and supports some wonderful charities, including one called Borne, which is very, very close to his heart, and one that which Alistair will go into tremendous detail. This episode is really fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I know that you will too. It is quite hard-hitting towards the end, so by all means, lock in for an emotional roller coaster, and I really hope that you enjoy it. Alistair, thank you very much for joining me on Headstrong.
Big pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm kicking off every episode in the same way with a new initiative called Check In With You. Mm-hmm. And I want to check in with you and see how you're doing today, how you're feeling and your emotions at this current time.
What a lovely way to open. I'd say pretty good, really. All things considered, we're in a very interesting point in our family life where I've got three boys and twin sons, the younger two, and one of them has departed the house not 10 minutes ago to go and do his final A-level exam. So it's a kind of it's a sort of a slightly magical time. It's a different time because my eldest is at university, and so we're moving into a kind of a fascinating new phase of our lives, really, as a family, but a good one. So I'm sort of buoyant, and actually I'm sort of looking outward because I'm very excited for them and what their sort of immediate future holds, really.
That's a really important transitional phase. Is university on the cards?
Yeah, they have plans. It looks like we're going to be in a family business. My eldest son is doing animation and visual effects at university. Wow. And the two younger ones, one of them is going to study TV production and has a place to do that, and the other one has fessed up about 6 weeks ago, which I kind of already knew, but he wants to become an actor. So I've got one that can do all the FX, one that can give me work, and the other one that can stand alongside me.
Well, more reason to have started your production company.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
I mean, you are an incredibly busy man. Honestly, when I was prepping for this episode, I was looking through your career, and you've got hundreds of credits. It's fantastic. You're a highly sought after actor. Been in the business for a number of years.
But that's true.
I'm interested to talk to you about your upbringing and your childhood, if we may. and particularly touching on the fact I believe your father was a military man.
That's right. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm interested to know then where kind of drama fitted in to this, because you spent a lot of time all over the world growing up, following your father around to a number of places. So I'm interested to know what that was like.
It's very interesting, and I've thought about it quite a lot recently for a variety of reasons. But yeah, he was. My father was in the military, and he always wanted to be a pilot. That was, but had no access to it because he was from a Scottish family. His father died when he was pretty young. His father was an engineer, and I'm not sure that he struggled with home life, but it wasn't his natural habitat, my grandfather, who I never met. And so he would go where he could work. And so he was killed. We don't really quite know why, or how rather, in we think a car accident in South Africa. And my father was quite young. And so he was brought up with his brother and his sister in a tiny flat in Aberdeen in Scotland. But due to his sporting prowess, and I think he was pretty smart, my dad, he got into the grammar school in Aberdeen. He was a very, very good rugby player. And there was the sort of the prospects of breaking outside of Aberdeen were pretty slim, really. In fact, I think he got a place at university as well, but which would have been the first by a long shot in our family, or his family at the time, to go anywhere near sort of a higher education. But he knew what he wanted to do. And so the church had a whip round to get the money together for him to get the train to head south to interview to join the Air Force. And that sort of detail, which we only found out relatively recently, was kind of extraordinary to hear, really. And he got into the Air Force, which was remarkable, really. And I think he was very tenacious about that, but it was something he always wanted to do. So when I kind of sort of announced grandly that I wanted to be an actor, I think he had no points of reference at all. There was nothing in our family that indicated towards that at all. But I think what he recognized was someone like himself who knew what they wanted to do. So I think I was expecting a huge amount of pushback, because he didn't understand it. And while he kind of liked watching the telly, I think he was probably a little suspicious of those people involved in it for a variety of reasons. So, and if you pair that up with, the overarching question, why I became an actor, it's something I've been kind of examining, really, due to the nature of my upbringing, the notion of moving every 3 years, needing to slot in, wanting to be a part of something. So there's a sort of a fairly deep-seated philosophical thought process about it, which intrigues me to this day, and I certainly don't really have the answers to it. But I think my mother was in... Go ahead, Louis, sorry.
It's certainly not a black and white answer, and I'd agree with you in that regard for sure. I'm interested to know, moving every 3 years and trying kind of having your home moving all the time and starting new schools, making new friends all the time. Was that a challenge for you then? And finding a place to feel at home, because knowing that there was a finite amount of time in these locations, you knew that you were going to be moving on eventually. So was that difficult?
I think it's reflected back very much now when my wife and I started our family. I was desperate and very keen to put down roots for my children. So it's sort of reflected in my adult life. It's like, when you grow up, the situations you find yourself in is normal because it's the only normality that you know. But when it becomes sort of your turn to think about these things and figure them out for your own children, that was definitely what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a solid base, and as fast as I could, for when our children arrived. But at the time, I think you have to adapt. You have to, it's probably one of the old cliches in the world about, parts of aspects of why actors become actors. I think definitely it was a part of the need, the desire, and I guess the ability to be who you needed to be in any given set of circumstances. And I think that translates rather obviously into sort of a professional career in many ways. So I didn't find it difficult because there was a sort of, I guess there was a childlike adventure attached to it. And I was really lucky. My dad, because he was a pilot, he was off in some quite exotic locations, so the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. So I spent 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7 to 10, 7 to 11 maybe, in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, which of course is, when you're that age, is sunshine and baseball. Obviously there are a lot of Americans there. So, and some European stuff, and also in Lagos in Nigeria too. So I guess there's a privilege attached to that. And you live a slightly gilded atmosphere, obviously. So I'd say sort of lucky to see those things rather than difficult, I think.
It's a very unique perspective that you have there, actually, seeing it as kind of, you have a unique gratitude towards what you experienced, particularly because I imagine it's all you ever knew. So it'd be difficult to compare it to what maybe I deem as normal, because yours was normal to you.
That's exactly right. And I look back on it with a lot of affection, actually, but I don't ever take it for granted. For not so much the worldview that it would have contributed to my worldview, but you did live a sort of a privileged existence, but partly for security reasons more than anything else. But it did allow me glimpses into things which I'm sort of examining today in sort of stories that one's looking at sort of trying to tell, certainly connected to the Middle East. And also now I've got family in Africa as well, that sort of extraordinary and brilliant continent. So yeah, it was my normal, but I reflect back on it with a huge sense of, I think it was a very lucky way. I was lucky to see what I saw in a way as a child, really.
When you spoke to your parents, when you said you wanted to pursue this career in the creative arts and acting, how old were you? And was this when you were back in the UK?
I was very young. I think I'm sort of half fascinated by the notion of false memories, but the memory that I have is that seeing my mother, who did lots of amateur dramatics, which again, when you move a lot, and given that my father had his job and my mother was sort of the amazing support network, she was great because she threw herself into all sorts of things that were on offer in all of these places that you lived in. And one of them was amateur dramatics. And I remember going to see a production that she was in, sort of Christmas time thing. And I think I was about 6, sitting in a theatre and probably just old enough to sort of keep quiet with a bag of sweets for the duration of the production for the first time. But I remember she said a line and then everyone laughed. And I do remember sort of literally sort of leaning forward and looking around and thinking, what is this? And I do remember it very, very well. And what that gave me, I don't truly know, but I think it gave me something about the magic of it and the power of it. And then I just started to do as much as I could, like so many people at school. That's where I found my tribe. And I was always very keen with my kids to explain to them if they were having a tough time at, the beginning of the 3 or 4 schools they went to, you'll find your tribe. And when you find your tribe, it's the greatest thing, and that's what you hope for. I don't care whether you're in first team for football or whatever. That doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you find your tribe, your gang, your community. You find your tribe, you find your gang, you find your community, and I think that's where I found mine. So a lot of it was at school, a lot at university. Well, when I say university, a very brief time I spent at university. I just did as much as I could. School was great at it.
Was it a matter of kind of a sense of purpose then as well? When you were moving and you were finding these new locations, and despite going to a new school, you knew that if you went into that kind of realm and that area, you'd have 2 firm feet in something to feel comfortable and get stuck into. You wouldn't have the need for any anxieties or nerves starting at a new school, making new friends, because you've got this pursuing this kind of adoration for drama, I guess.
Yeah, immediately. And generally with drama, it was always people were in the room because they really wanted to be there. Mm. And I think that takes the edge off any sort of potential anxiety. You just know whether it is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 people who are standing in a room on day one of anything. They basically want to be there. And that is quite a thing. No one's forced to be there. It's not a lesson in school that you have to attend. So you know that some people don't want to be there. And I think that was really appealing to me, to be in that environment.
So you talked briefly there about university. You had a brief time there, but you did end up going to acting school. What, first of all, before we go on to it, what was the university course?
Uh,
And where was
well,
it?
I was. My father was very keen. He was a strong-willed man, and he was very keen that I go to university. And I think I grew up my teenage years. A lot of it was spent, like many people, trying to please their old man. And so the suggestion was go to university. And I was given a piece of advice which I wouldn't give to someone else now, and I haven't done. Which was, I was told at school, well, you can always do the acting thing, but why don't you go to university and get a degree to fall back on? That's right. Okay. And that seems perfectly logical. I don't think it's the right advice for someone that doesn't want a plan B and only has a plan A, which was very much my case. Anyway, so I applied for university, and I chose my university not because I was massively bright, and the university course by, I was doing 2 modern languages and English at, I was doing Spanish, French and English at A-level. And I went into the little office and they said, so university, have you thought about it? And I went, yeah. And they said, what are you going to study? And I said, I have no idea, but I thought I could do sort of backdoor drama. I thought, well, maybe that's, and then I need to attach something to drama. So I was okay at French, not great at it, but I was okay. So I opened up the book and I just literally squirreled and just put my finger on a course, and it just said French and drama on the sort of the languages course. And I went, great, I'll do that. And my sister at the time was at University of London, and I'd been up to her college a couple of times, and it was a small one in Hampstead. A, it was a nice area. B, it was really small. So I thought, great, I'll apply there because my sister's there and I'm sure it'll be great. So I arrived, I got in, and that was fine. I got in and I knew immediately that I wanted to be there for the people. I was consuming people, I mean, it was just phenomenal. And I loved it, but I just hated doing French. So I didn't bother turning up to the first year exams. And I got thrown out of university, which is something I'm hugely proud of because that's quite hard to do. And the day I got thrown, I'd also been surreptitiously auditioning for drama school. And the day I got booted out of university was the day I actually got a letter from Lambda saying you've been accepted. And my mother phoned
really
me.
aligned. Wow.
Well, it was really weird. It was kind of weird. And there was a great joy in looking at the tutor I had, who was this very austere, besuited tutor who sort of summoned me into his office and said, I'm afraid I have no option but to send you down. And I remember thinking, Jesus, this isn't Oxford. Send me down? What does that mean? You pompous fart. And so, I think he was expecting me to sort of grovel and beg and plead and burst into tears. And I sort of shrugged and went, okay, which took him by surprise. And then that night I went into the university bar and I got the accommodations officer absolutely shit-faced and asked him if I could keep my room for the rest of the year because I was having such a good time. And he went, sure, great, yeah, fine. But if I need it back, I'll have to ask for it back. And I went, yeah, no problem. Of course, he never did. And I spent the rest of the year there. Haunting the professor who kept seeing me around campus, not holding any books. And I think he was really, really fucked off.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it was a hell of a year. It was a great year. It was a great year. And then I went straight to Lambda after that, yeah.
Yeah, so talking about that audition process then for Lambda, did you apply for any other drama schools as well?
I did. I applied for Central. I think I applied for Central, RADA and Lambda. And I was sort of doing it on my own. There was no sort of resource. I was literally on which ones had I basically heard of that were the best. And I cannot for the life of me remember what happened at RADA.
Can you remember any audition pieces? What you did?
Yeah, it was just terrible. I mean, ridiculously bad. So again, because I had no one that was helping me out, I thought, right, I'm going to show off my vast and deep wells of talent and skill set. And so I chose. I think I think what saved me was I got together the Map of the World, which is a David Hare play, and I sort of spliced together a speech, and I thought, well, no one's going to have heard this, so that's quite good, and it sort of suited me rather well. It was, I think Bill Nye played the part originally, so that and I wasn't a million miles away. I mean, maybe he played it when he was like 30, and although I was sort of 19 years old, I just thought that's fine. But then I thought, to show off my astonishing versatility, aged 19, I thought it'd be a really good idea to do Willy Loman from Death of the Salesman. Death of a Salesman, who is probably at least 70 years old and American. And I thought this would be genius. And of course, it was just a terrible idea. So I did that, and the Shakespeare. I think I did something from King Lear, but but the worst one was Central, and it became this apocryphal story, and because somebody actually repeated this story back to me many years later in one of those. Did you hear this story ever? I went, oh, right, all right. So there was a guy who came.
Oh, here we go.
There was a guy who came to Central and was doing I forget which, Edgar or Edmund, the one on the Heath, basically. You know, it's all kicking off in the storm and everything else. And I arrived at Central, and again, in my naivety, I thought it would show huge commitment if 5 minutes before my turn to go in to audition, that I would leave the waiting room. I would go outside into the autumn weather, into the garden of Central, just out the front, and I would remove all my clothes down to my pants. I would cover myself in mud. Then I would come back upstairs. I would walk into the audition room, and they would look at me and go, wow, we have something special here. I look back on that now and thinking, yeah, that was probably not the best thing. But I did it with some considerable elan. And then afterwards, I then, of course, had to go and sit in the waiting room in my pants with this pile of clothes on my knee, covered in mud. And Central was the only drama school where they told you on the day whether they were going to invite you back for recall. Other ones, you went in and you left and you got a letter or a phone call or whatever. So I sat there looking very smug and happy. And I remember the person came and said, thank you all very much for coming. We'd like to ask the following 5 people to come back. And I remember just looking around and nodding, going, yeah, it's me and 4 others. And of course, my name wasn't read out. And I was astounded. I thought they were passing up on the opportunity of a lifetime. Anyway, cut to literally 3, it was like years later. This story had whipped round Central the next day about this absolute idiot who turned up. And of course, no one thought it showed commitment. I think people just thought I was an utter twat. And they were right. Anyway, so Central I did not get into. But LAMDA, I think they sort of parked the Willy Loman thing, and I managed to kind of sneak in there, which was, that's how I ended up at LAMDA.
That is one hell of a story.
Not Central.
Not Central.
It still makes me wince. Oof.
Do you know what? I've got a couple of friends at Central. I wonder if the story's still going around.
Ask them. The guy that turned up and honestly covered himself in mud and did Edmund or Edgar. We're talking circa a long time ago. Oh my God, it is a long time ago. 88, 89.
Oh, I'm going to have to ask. That is absolutely quality.
Them. I guarantee someone will go, I've heard that story. I mean, I'm sure there are 1,000 awful auditionee stories, but mine was, it wasn't good.
I mean, something I was about to ask you was about, the pre-nerve audition jitters, but clearly there was no such thing as nerves for you, just pure courage. And I don't know, yeah. or is it ignorance? I don't know.
I think it's definitely not courage. I think it's total and utter ignorance. I mean, I've counselled the odd young actor, and just sort of said, just don't do that. And now we live in the world of sort of self-tapes, and my nephew actually has just is on the verge of graduating from LAMDA, and of course they are so well trained now in terms of all of that world of auditioning and self-tapes and all that kind of thing. But it's like, dude, playing background, playing background
for sure.
Don't cover yourself in mud because everyone will just laugh at you. So
So LAMDA's renowned for being a fantastic drama school, obviously, and quite classical in terms of its training as well, I suppose. But when did it become a reality for you at drama school? Were you signed by an agent for it to become a living for you? I mean, did you already have that mentality when you joined, knowing this is going to be a profession, or was there a flick of a switch at some point?
No, I think I didn't really see beyond the end of my nose. I don't think any of us did really. I think we were excited about just being a part of it, and it was different then. I think in the sense that nowadays, if you leave drama school, and I'm not saying this is definitive, it's not at all, but because of the nature of the shift, pandemic notwithstanding, to sort of the television platforms that exist in the world, and all the rest of it, there was not a massive film industry going on. Television was being made, but we didn't have streaming. There was BBC One, so it was very different. so the notion was you were just desperate and excited to start working in the theatre. That was the route, and then picking up some telly along the way. And that was our world. I had no desire actually to work in film. Wasn't on my horizon. We didn't seem to be making very many films out of the UK. So and television was fair, small but relatively small. So theatre was where aspirations lay. That's where we kind of looked, and maybe to pick up a little bit of telly here and there just to earn a bit more money than got paid in theatre. But it was never about. There was no sort of grand plan. It was just being a part of it, and I loved that notion of it.
And you did do a lot of theatre, didn't you? In fact, I think, am I right in saying one of your contemporaries is Mr. Fiennes?
Well, I worked with Rafe and Joe actually, but we weren't contemporaries at drama school.
No, you've worked with him though. You've shared awards.
Rafe. Yeah. Yes, I have. Yeah, absolutely, I have. Yeah. We did a very epic Ibsen together in at the Haymarket, which was and the RSC actually, which was great. So yeah, and I worked with Joe as well on film, and the great Fiennes brothers.
Absolutely. Now, you spent, as you say there, a lot of time at the RSC. You spent, I think, a couple of years there as well, and you've got a whole list of credits to your name now. And now I'm going to ask you the most horrendous, horrible question that, as an actor, I shouldn't ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Go for it.
What is your favourite thing that you have done, but not to have done? Because I always say that every cast and everything is always fantastic and a great experience. But what's your favourite if you had to watch it back? What's the one that you've enjoyed the most from the content?
On stage?
Or screen, any credit.
Oh, blimey.
That's a very difficult question, but...
No, it's an interesting one. I have my instinctive reaction for a variety of reasons was not only the experience and the production, but also, the experience of doing it and the experience of performing it on the biggest stage, which was His Dark Materials.
But which was a poster behind you, in fact.
Oh God, this isn't like my living room, by the way. That would be so narcissistic.
I was about to say, I love the room though. It's great.
No, it's basically, I can close the door and it's my space, and I don't sit here in some wistful reflection at all. It's just got some nice reminders of some really nice times. So yeah, there is actually a picture of it behind me. But yeah, this is not my living room. I laughingly call it my office. But I'd say His Dark Materials was pretty special because, for a whole variety of reasons, not only the company, but also it was the first time I'd worked at the National Theatre, which, all actors, as you know, sort of walk past that massive building. And if they haven't been there before, go one day. It would be amazing. And I'd spent a good, I don't know, however long it was, 10 years sort of walking past that building going, one day, wouldn't that be amazing? And to do a production like that, as for starters, was extraordinary, not least because I remember we were allowed to invite sort of family, I think, to our dress rehearsal of this two-parter. And my nephew came and nieces and stuff. Anyway, there was probably an audience of about 80 with sort of family and stuff dotted around. In fact, probably in the circle, because all the tech stuff was still going on. And I remember my nephew was there, and at the time he was probably, about 6 or 7. And it spoke to him in just volumes, the story did. And then I think at the time a grandparent came as well, and it spoke to them. And that was just, how often does that happen when it's not a panto? Very, very rarely. So knowing that you were delivering a story to an age range that was right across the spectrum, and it's speaking to those audiences was really extraordinary. And that I think meant a lot. Also, I was playing a polar bear.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often. And so the nature of the storytelling and the epic nature of the storytelling on the biggest stage was magical. And it's one of those things you reflect back on, because I think what can happen is with a lot of jobs, that some of the jobs that you do are just brilliant at the time, and then life moves on, and that's totally fine. Whereas there's a sort of bond, really, that, there's people that I'm still, that we're sort of bonded by it, and ergo have become, close friends. David Harewood, was in it. And there's an invisible link between all of you, which exists to this day. And that means there's some kind of alchemy, which is rather magical, really. But I'm lucky because I've worked with some fantastic companies, both on stage and on screen. And yeah, I love those invisible links. I really do. And I think, as you will know, the community of this industry, it can feel from the outside looking in so vast and complex. And actually, I'd argue that it is relatively small, or feels relatively small, I should say. On occasion, I know sometimes it can feel relatively vast and ergo rather lonely, but equally, I love the intimacy of it. The community, that's just huge in my life.
Absolutely. Now, transitioning over from stage to screen, there's a particular credit that I want to talk to you about, no least because it's my favourite TV show, and gutted that there was only one series, which is The Night Manager.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, it was only ever written to be pretty much one series because it was from a book, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and that, again, there's some great actors in that. Hugh Laurie, Tom Hiddleston, and that was quite an experience, I imagine, kind of jet-setting everywhere as well, almost.
It's funny because it was. I mean, that show and job absolutely falls into the category that I was just talking about. You know, there is a sort of an invisible bond because you share something pretty remarkable. And it was an extraordinary experience. It began with a very lovely phone call from my agent, through my agent from Gina Jay's office, saying with an offer to be in this show. And I read it, and the part was sort of okay, and I was like, yeah, it's really well written, and it's Le Carré, and that's great. But I had to sort of break it down into its constituent parts. And one of those parts I had to consider was, as an actor, what's it going to be like to work on for 4 months? And so I was slightly umming and ahhing. And then I reread it, and with the view of, wait a minute, all these people are basically billionaires. So this could be quite good fun. And my concern is that I would basically spend 4 months standing just left of Hugh Laurie, slightly out of focus, and whether that would be a particularly tiresome working experience. And then I reread it, and then I very rapidly said to myself, shut the fuck up. Look at the people who are working on this. Look who David Farr, who adapted it. Look who's directing it. Look where it's coming from, as in the source material, Le Carré. Hugh, Tom, Olivia, and you just go, right, maybe just shut the fuck up and maybe just jump. And so I did indeed shut the fuck up and jump, and it became remarkable for a variety of reasons. The first one was that the alchemy, this thing I talked earlier about alchemy, you can have all the right ingredients in place and you can just line them all up, and the alchemy can just not come together. It can just not work. And I had that with the stage experience, which it was all lined up and it just didn't click. This did. And not only that, the working experience was great because it was very much an ensemble. When you've got sort of 3, 4, I mean, I haven't even mentioned Tom Hollander and Elizabeth Debicki. When you've got this kind of group of people, especially Tom and Hugh primarily leading it with Olivia, really, there is 2 leading characters facing off between Tom and Hugh. It becomes potentially a star-driven vehicle. And the way it was pieced together was very much as an ensemble. We rehearsed every morning before we turned over. The cameras didn't roll usually until, certainly until we were fully rehearsed. So we left the hotel, went straight to set. There was none of this going to unit base and having some breakfast and sort of lounging around for a bit while everyone else did their important work. So we went straight to set. And I remember the first day, the driver said, I'm going to drop you straight at set. And we're all like, what? Where's my what? And of course, it was amazing because you rehearsed until you had figured out the scene, and then you could start shooting. And I think the producers were like, Jesus, we haven't turned over and it's midday, Christ. But we never went an hour over. We never needed to do any pickups. I mean, it was a fantastic way of working, led by the very peerless Susanna Bier, who directed the whole thing. And so it was an ensemble piece. We'd rehearse every scene. And Hugh is extraordinary because he has no desire to, get his elbows out. His only, and Tom as well, the only motivation is what makes the scene work. How does the scene work at its best? Hugh was more keen to give lines away rather than try and get any more. And so it was incredibly collaborative. Everyone had a voice. And on the first day, we suddenly went, shit, this is this has the potential to be really good. And then with the visuals and the discussions and all the other things, we finished shooting in Morocco. We had a party for the Moroccan crew, and Susanna played a sort of a 3-minute reel of what we'd shot that they'd spliced together. And I remember one of the sound guys bouncing up and down with a beer in his hand, saying, a lovely guy from South Africa, he just said, "Oh man, I'd work on this for free from now on. I love it. And we knew that something potentially great was happening. But with, I guess, a real sense of humbleness about it. We just thought, let's keep striving. And then it became this thing. And so so just to get back to the original point of me, I would be sitting here going, "Oh, you dickhead." So, look at each project on its own merits. You have to look at it slightly selfishly at some point, but equally just then retreat, look at the whole. And, if you're in a fortunate position to make a decision about something, then, make sure it's informed. It was magical. Now, as actors, as you well know, you don't get to see the half of the stresses and strains, what goes on behind. And I'm sure there are millions, because it's really difficult to make something good. And it can be challenging. And I'm sure tons of it was, but we never got to see it. So we just reaped the very happy benefits of it. But it's kind of in there now as sort of part of the TV landscape, and to be a part of it is again, an unbelievable privilege. That's a phrase I will use a lot in this business, but it's true. It was an unbelievable privilege.
I mean, what a brilliant and unique experience, the way that you've just described it in such detail. It sounds really unique. And what's great is you enjoy everything that you do. I can really get that across from what you're telling me.
Yeah.
I have no doubt as well that what the next production that we're going to talk about is a whole unique, different type of fun in the form of sex education.
Yeah,
and how starkly different, but also how very ensemble as well. And actually,
I think
bringing together.
It's where I feel I thrive, really. I can't be cynical about this business. It's an industry built on rejection. We know that, and I think everybody is. There's 0.0001% of the people that go, "Rejection? I don't know what that is." But everyone in this business, it is an industry built on rejection, and that is the nature of it. And that ebbs and flows all of the time. And it's a confidence business, and where you get your confidence from in this business can be from wherever, but it's all of that. But I think I thrive very much within an ensemble. Everybody working towards the same goal. And what's so fabulous about sex education, amongst many things, is that it has that feel. Nobody has their elbows out. And I'll say this very distinctly, actually, about Asa. I can't pay Asa higher compliments than he's the best of us, Asa. He is the most, and he's the leading man, I guess you could say. But his generosity, which is so instinctual, it's not forced at all. I think, a lot of the other young cast who've never done anything sort of look to Asa, not to see how to behave, but just to observe his manner, and went, "Oh, right, that's how you do it." He's just a supreme human being. But it is, I think we all thrive within an ensemble. And if someone doesn't, I think then it's not, I think there's other things going on that they need to sort of figure out in life. And that's okay, but the ensemble spreads, which I think is pretty unique as well, spreads from not only the cast, but also to the people that work on it. So our execs from 11, John Jennings, who produces it, Ben Taylor, who directs it, and Ron Urari, who's directed it this year. It sort of spreads beyond just sort of cast and then the grown-ups over there, which is amazing. But I do remember my first day. I just thought, oh God. I had a costume fitting, and I spoke to Rose, our costume designer. Well, I was being fitted in the most awful kind of old man tweed that didn't fit, and it wasn't supposed to fit. And literally, people died in this stuff. I'm sure people got buried in my suits, and then they dug them up and hung them up at Angels and said, "One day they'll be useful." Anyway, I was wearing these things. And I said to Rosa, I said, "Oh, what's the uniform like that the kids are going to be wearing?" She went, "Oh, no, they're not in uniform." I went, "Oh, right." And she just showed me pictures of these outfits that were just incredible for the youngsters in it. And there was I. And I genuinely thought, Jesus, I feel I'm 150. And I thought, right, on this job, I'm going to turn up on day one, and I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm going to sit in the corner. I'm just going to do my job. And then I'm just going to take a step back. And then I'm going to just let them do their brilliance and let them shine. And I'm just going to do my job, and I'll disappear. And thank you so much for having me. And I remember arriving on day one, feeling 150. And the first day I had to do was to address the entire school with all these, characters dotted in amongst all the brilliant essays that we've got. And, yeah, they were just so lovely to me. I felt like the newcomer. I really did. I just felt so isolated for about a second. And then the green room, of course, while we were filming in Penarth for this sort of 3-day stretch where I deliver all these school sort of eulogies in the school assemblies, was just like it was like a party with endless cups of tea and cake. Just the noise was extraordinary, just full of joy. And so I love this show. I love it. I love what it speaks to. I love making it, and I love the personnel involved. It's something, again, that's very, very special. And then when it reaches out into the world and touches so many people that it has done, of all ages, then again, you just go, Jesus, how lucky am I yet again to have another kind of alchemic experience working on a show. But I love this show. I really, really do.
I wanted to talk to you about this this youthful cast that has come in and is, as you say, absolutely leading it, and how that feels for you kind of fitting in. But it seems like you're part of the ship, part of the crew.
Folded in. So folded in.
Is there a lot of banter?
There's loads. There's tons. I'm very, very close to Connor Swindells, who plays my son. We're very close, and I adore him. I think he's a supreme talent. To have the instinctive ability to turn up on a show and do so little and nail it is. My jaw's on the floor. In fact, it's entirely thanks to Connor I'm in this show. They cast, I think Connor was one of, if not the first person who was cast in the show. They saw obviously tons. Can you imagine how many young actors they would have seen for this show?
Alistair, I auditioned for that role, man.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you really?
And do you know what, though? Because I remember when I watched it for the first time, and obviously he's in the opening scene, right?
Yeah.
And I was watching it, and I was just like, first of all, I couldn't have done that. And then I finished the first series and I was just like, you know what? Thank fuck I didn't get the role. I cannot do that. He nailed it.
No, it's so interesting. You see, to your point, it's interesting. It's just that, and so that's about, how they get the alchemy of the cast together and all the rest of it. But they cast Connor, and then Jamie Campbell, my agent, phoned and said, "Oh, I've got this script. It's called Sex Education. He says it's really good." He said, "Anyway, Jamie Campbell is the exec on it, and I know Jamie." And I was in a show at the time on TV, and we were having a big old do. I was doing a thing with Mark Strong, and she said, "Listen, I'm going to bring Jamie along to watch." We did a sort of a flashy 2-episode show at the Cuz, and said, "I'm going to bring Jamie along because it'd be great to see you on this thing, and we'll have a nice evening." Anyway, I met Jamie that night, and I was going in to meet them, I think, the next day or the day after. Anyway, Jamie was charming and delightful, and so I went in to meet Ben, our director and exec producer, JJ, our producer, and I think Lauren, who was casting it. Anyway, I walked into the room, and they were just so lovely. They were all saying, "Oh, it's lovely to meet you." I was like, "Lovely to meet you." We chatted, and and it's just like we were all over each other. I love the show. We were like, "We love you," and it's like great. And I walked out going, "Jesus, that was just the nicest half hour of my life." Anyway, cut to about an hour later, I got offered the job, and I was like, "Shit, this doesn't normally happen with this kind of rapidity." And Netflix have cleared you, and that's all good. And then basically, one of the brilliant reasons was that Connor had been cast, and because we looked so similar, I'd walked into the room, and they'd gone, "We knew it." In their heads, they were going, "We knew it." Jesus. I think they literally held up, before my meeting, they'd held up a picture of Connor and a picture of me and gone, come on. And, hey, I'll take however I get it, I'll take it. And it's still to this day, we get loads of love on loads of stuff online. People just saying, are you his dad? And I just go, maybe. And I love that. And we've built a really, really lovely bond. But what the other thing I love about watching, I just sort of sit in my comfy chair and I just watch the rise of this this cast, and the opportunities that are now coming their way due to just really good work that they do. And it gives me endless pleasure. It really does. I mean, Connor's at the moment filming this thing about the SAS. He's number one on the call sheet. Obviously, Emma's doing brilliantly. Ncuti is just celebrated. I mean, so many of them. Amy Lou Wood, again, is like a daughter to me. They're all of them. You're just watching really wonderfully talented people now get opportunities, and for which they are all, again, there's a gratitude and a humbleness to all of this. And I think challenges come with it as well. I think the attention was pretty startling for them. And is startling. When you suddenly go from 200 followers on Instagram to 5 million, that's a pretty good snapshot of where your kind of life is at.
Physical and mental well-being are so important and come hand in hand. I'm incredibly proud to be sponsored by the CBD brand, The Good Level, who have well-being at the very forefront of what they do as a company and a brand. They offer CBD oils, balms, and jellies, all of which are full spectrum and extracted by a cold press. Their oils are all made with extra virgin olive oil from Kalamata, and that makes them so much tastier than any other that I've tried before. Their balms have a fantastic smell as well, and are great to use on your skin or any pain you're experiencing. And of course, their jellies taste so great for any sweet tooths. They also have a commitment to sustainability, pledging to plant at least 500 trees every year, along with ensuring all their packaging is recyclable. So if you want to check The Good Level out, go to their Instagram page at the.good.level, where you can find out all about their products. And if you'd like a discount, feel free to use Headstrong15 at checkout on their website. As you say, it's an immense platform that it was projected onto. And I actually remember speaking to Asa before it was coming out, and they were on, I think, doing a press release with Emma. And I remember him telling me who Emma was. And I looked and she only had 5,000 followers. And I was just like, oh, this would be cool. It'd be quite nice if, Asa could introduce me for the podcast, whatever. And then I checked 2 weeks later and she was like, I was like, did I miss something? And I was just like, no, I didn't, because I watched the show. The reach was immense. And I think it goes to show the narrative of the show and what it kind of captures hadn't really been done before to the capacity that it brings. And it kind of brings a unique kind of story and group of people together that's reflective of true popular culture.
I think if you break it down, it's a very simple idea. Let's examine the lives and loves of young people in a school environment. That's been done before. But I think the script had been around for a little while. I think this is right. And I think it was just trying to find its tone, which is, when you're in production, there's constant just going, what's the tone of it? What's the tone of it? On anything you're working on, if you're in sort of the early stages of it, in the sort of building, the writing process of something, what's its tone? And I think when the current team sort of got together, when Ben got involved and read it, I think he said, I think I know what this is. And obviously the homage to the 80s films, the John Hughes films, became a good kind of reference point. And then I think it found its tone. But I think originally it wanted to come from a place of real warmth and not cynicism. And that was a kind of a founding tenet of this show. And it was determined to be, diverse and inclusive, and not front heavy-footed, issue-based, but inevitably growing up, there are all of these things to examine and discuss. But I think that the maddest sort of person, I had this guy, I was walking down Garrick Street in London, and this guy, he must have been 80 plus. I mean, literally, he came charging out of a restaurant on Garrick Street with a napkin in his proper old school, stuffed in his shirt. And he came up to me mid dinner, I guess, and he just went, "Young man." That took me aback. I was like, "Thank you very much." to young mate, that show is the most wonderful. Anyway, I was like, thank you so much. Because, I mean, I've said it a lot, but I do believe it's that you know, if you're 15, 16, 17, and you watch the show, it will speak to you. But, you know, if you're 80, you were 17, 15, 16, 17 once, and you remember all of those things. So thematically universal about how you felt about growing up, and how you felt about sex, and how you felt about love, and how you felt about your parents, and how you just felt or tried to feel. And it speaks to all of those things. And it's, there's magic in this show. There really is.
No, you've really captured it there. Now, as much as I could sit here for hours talking about every single credit that you have done, I really could, because I love it. I love hearing about everyone's experiences and unique experiences on jobs. But I'm really pleased to have got you on Headstrong, because you have a wonderful and unique story yourself outside of work. You're indeed a patron and ambassador for Borne, which is a charity that researches to prevent premature birth.
Correct.
And if you're happy and comfortable to do so, I was wondering if you might be able to kind of just kind of retell your narrative, yours and Lucy's narrative and experiences, just to kind of give it some context before we talk about it.
Yeah, of course. Well, Lucy and I when we got together, we were very keen to have children. We were both come from a place of, we wanted to have children together. And so our eldest son was born. He was a couple of weeks premature. But which is not unusual at all. And then I think Lucy had quite a few miscarriages and so forth, and had an ectopic pregnancy, which it's, you know, in this inverted commas public domain, because I spoke about it, to do with a thing for the charity. And so, you know, we said to ourselves, well, if we're lucky enough to have, you know, we have a son, and we're lucky to have a son. And if we can't have any more children, then you know, we've done pretty well where other people won't have succeeded. So that's pretty good. Anyway, Lucy got pregnant again, and we thought, okay, well, fingers crossed, here we go. And she was pregnant with twins, which we just took as a sign from, I don't know, whatever you believe in. And I'm not a religious man, but I sort of looked left, right, upwards, downwards, and just said a quiet thank you, because it felt like something, someone, somewhere had said, okay, you two are doing pretty okay, and maybe you can offer a little bit of love. I did have a sort of a vaguely spiritual sort of sense about it. Anyway, they were born 9.5 weeks, so nearly 10 weeks early. We were told if they got to 28 weeks, if the pregnancy got to 28 weeks, there was a very good chance of survival. So we thought, well, okay, when we got to 30 weeks, we thought, okay, we're in quite good shape. Now we can have the courage to go to sort of, you know, mother care with a credit card and just start having a bit of a laugh and buying the fun stuff and enjoying it. Because up till that point, it wasn't enjoyable, because, you know, it was touch and go. And then literally the next day, Lucy went into labor. And so, yeah, kind of very long story short, where she was supposed to end up having the boys, the hospital had no incubators available. And so I said, well, what happens? Then they said, well, we can slow the pregnancy down, hopefully by about 48 hours, by giving her this specific drug. And if we give her that drug, what that drug does is it slows the pregnancy down. And that drug also allows sort of an artificial growth for the boy's lungs. And that was their biggest concern, is lung growth. And he said, for every hour, we can slow down the labor. That gives us another almost a day and a half, 2 days, something like that, I forget, but of kind of lung growth. And that will be key to their survival. So, okay. And I said, well, what happens to the babies? And they said, well, we have no incubators on site, and they're going to need incubators. There's a rolling emergency list that we have on the computer. We'll look down that list. And then once we can see available beds, that's when we will book them, and all good. It didn't occur to me that that list obviously pops up individual beds. It doesn't individual incubators. It doesn't, 2, 3, 4. So at one point it was, we've got 2 beds, 2 incubators reserved. I went, fantastic. Where are they? And they said, one's in Birmingham. And I said, one's in Birmingham. Yeah. And the other was in a hospital in Essex. I said, right, how does that work? And they said, well, one of the boys will be sent by ambulance to the hospital in Essex, and one will be sent to the one in Birmingham. I thought, this is insane. How does that... I was racking my brains, desperately trying to think of, and they said, we'll keep checking the list. And obviously we don't want to split them up if you don't have to. And they kept checking this list. And while they were doing that, I said, is there anything at Chelsea and Westminster? Not that it was our local hospital. It's just that I had a friend who was a surgeon there. He wasn't involved in, he was a craniofacial surgeon. And so they said, no, there's nothing at Chelsea and Westminster. So I picked up the phone and phoned my friend Martin and said, Martin, this has happened. Is there anything that you can do? And he said, I will make a call, but there is nothing at my fingertips because it's just not my department, but I'll do my best. He phoned me about 5 minutes later and said, Al, there's nothing I can do. Literally, there's nothing available. And then 2 minutes after that, someone barked from the office just along from the potential delivery suite and said, 2 have come up at Chelsea and Westminster. I mean, just phenomenal. A couple of kids had been discharged. And so we were like, book them. So amazingly, they were transferred by ambulance to the Chelsea and Westminster. So, the trauma had already begun, really. And one of my sons got a lung disease. And I had to ask a very difficult question of the consultant. I had to say, will my son die? And they said, we don't know. And he was taken to have a biopsy on his lung, and they were being injected a lot with a lot of needles and so forth, and it was all very traumatic, because especially that they were like 4 days old, and they were going to open him up and do a biopsy on the lung to try and figure out what the problem was, because his oxygen requirements were going up and down, up and down, up and down. His twin brother was in quite good nick, still on oxygen and CPAP, but he was progressing. But his brother was just struggling like hell. And they said to us that the options were he's either going to die. They didn't put it quite as bluntly, but he was either going to die. Best case scenario, you'd be able to take him home, but he would be on steroids and probably an oxygen tank, which he'd have to carry around with him for between possibly 6 and 10 years. And I said, okay, if we can avoid the steroids, because I knew that the damage that would do to his body, if we can avoid steroids, I will snatch your hand off if it's just the oxygen tank. And they went, okay, we'll file that and we'll get back to you. Anyway, astoundingly, whatever this condition was, it was a pulmonary condition. Somehow it burnt itself out. And he didn't need an oxygen tank. It showed the little blighter had some considerable strength within him. So we eventually ended up taking him home. No oxygen tank required, but it was so startling. And I think the thing about it is that we didn't realize until I started talking to the great Professor Mark about the charity, and he's big in the neonatal unit at Chelsea and Westminster, about what the prematurity, we don't know why it happens. There's not a lot of research that goes into it particularly, but it affects tens of millions of children worldwide. It's the biggest cause of prematurity, is the biggest cause of disability. And so much of it is preventable. So they're doing remarkable work, Borne. They've got a really good plan. They don't, it's not a sort of a rolling year by year charity. They're really smart people, led by some fantastic brains. But to try and, if we can stop prematurity, then it would just cause just less death, less disability, less trauma. And the sort of the button I'm trying to push with it, quietly really, is the money that the NHS would save. They spend hundreds of millions of pounds a year on prematurity. And if we can try and get some research money from government, then it's kind of a no-brainer. Put that money can be put elsewhere. So we went through something pretty extraordinary, and they're both fine now. They're tall, lanky, and all the rest of it, and healthy, more importantly. But prematurity is, if we can find a way to fix that, then not only in the UK but worldwide, it's a worldwide endeavour, because it can be done. It can be done.
I really, really appreciate you retelling that story, and I can only imagine. Well, do you know what? I can't even fathom and comprehend the experiences that you have gone through with your wife, particularly because, notably, I'm not a father yet. But what this podcast is rooted in mental health, and I wanted to I mean, it'll be so very difficult to kind of probably even capture it in words, because words won't be able to do it justice. But did you have a support network around you? What was your strategy to kind of actually be able to get your head around what was going on at the time? Because you are very much rooted in reality and you're very much in the present, and it is touch and go, but you have to remain sane. How did you manage to do that?
I've thought about it a lot, really. You learn an awful lot. My godson actually was diagnosed, again, fine now, but when he was 8, was diagnosed with leukemia. And I mention it because there's a sort of a parallel that I sort of discovered, that I go into a very, not cold, but a sort of a numb crisis mode. Which is, right, what can we do to not necessarily fix it, but how do we mitigate? What can I do as an individual to navigate this problem? How can I help that situation? So with my godson, it was like, right, we need a shield. We don't need people phoning you up. They can phone me. And so, I got very, and I've never forgotten about with my sons asking the question. I had to ask a difficult question. I thought, right, I need to shield. Lucy's got enough going on. She's going to be refereeing the boys and sort of attempting to breastfeed and all of those things with them. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to shield her from the difficult. So I'll ask the difficult questions and get the answers. And I remember, never forget, sitting in a room and asking that question, will my son die? And they said, it's possible. I went, right, okay. I felt like I didn't have time to emotionally fall or waver, or so. I said, that's going to help no one. So we'll get to that. We'll park that side of it for the moment. Let's just deal with what's in front of us, and then we'll deal with the individual personal fallout later. I am not the most important person in this situation. I'm just not. They are. Everyone else is. So that was kind of, in those two instances with my godson and the boys, that became, I've reflected on it from time to time. It doesn't make me superhuman or emotionally stunted or whatever you want to call it, but it was, I think, effective. And then, of course, you think, well, then what's the aftermath of that? I mean, some people have said who've been through some form of trauma, losing a parent or whatever it is. They said, oh, what generally happens is that 6 months from now, you'll be standing in your kitchen making a cup of tea and you'll fall into a heap on the floor. And, it'll all come out. And did it? I think it probably did to a certain extent. I'd like to think I'm pretty emotionally engaged with the world and myself. But I know I am. But yeah, it's sort of two sides of an interesting brain, which is I can get very, good to give me a crisis and I can navigate it, but I can park the emotional side for when I need to. And then I can feel like, I'll address it later when I've got the time to do it. When everyone's okay. It doesn't mean that I sit there and self-reflect on it, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's a really interesting point, and I certainly don't have any answers to it. But I'm sort of more curious about it than anything as well.
No, absolutely. It's really interesting to hear firsthand how it is processed, and indeed how it's not processed as well in when you're experiencing it, because you almost don't want to process it. I anticipate to say. And then, as you say, I mean, to a certain degree, later down the line, those experiences come out of you, and you do kind of let it out. But I mean, I'm immensely happy for you. I mean, that everything's going so well. But the thing that I do want to talk about is the amazing work that you do for Borne, quite literally with your own physical body, from the cycling to the swimming to the marathons. I mean,
yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Well, it's being married to someone that is so brilliantly kind of. My wife is the kind of individual that can't stop consuming and learning, and it's really inspiring to be married to, because I kid you not, I got back from work yesterday and I said, "How was your day?" And she said, "Well, I did." She said, "I did this." She said, "I went to Brighton to swim." I went, "Oh God, I thought you left early." She said, "Yeah," and I went Brighton to swim. And she said, "I went, oh, Brighton to swim it." And I said, "What?" I said, "Are you?" and I kid you not, this is my question. I said, are you swimming the channel in a relay this year? And she went, yeah, with Lou. I went, all right. I mean, you'd think I did know that, but I think because it's the kind of thing that my brilliant wife does all the time. And then she said, oh, I got back from Brighton and I almost missed my first ballet class. I was like, right. And wow. I can't tell you how amazing that is to be married to someone like that. I just, wow, if you can find a partner just with this kind of life consumption instinct, it's just glorious. So I just kind of run along behind going, okay, I'll do that.
How inspiring.
Yeah, very inspiring. So we wanted to, I think, after the boys, it was the neonatal unit primarily that we were raising. This kind of series of fundraising that we did was to raise money for the neonatal unit. And we said after we were so grateful for the astounding help that the NHS gave us. We just said, what do you need? We'd like to raise some money. What do you need? And they actually said, do you know what we'd love? We went, what? And they said, we'd love a rocking chair. Is it a rocking chair? Said, yeah, it really helps for new mothers breastfeeding because it rocks the baby and they can breastfeed and it just relaxes both the baby and mum. I went, rocking chair, totally fine. What else? Like what? And we sort of pointed at an incubator, which had been such a defining part of our lives, or the boys' lives. I said, what about that? And they went, well, that. I said, well, how much is one of those? And they said, well, to switch it on and have it running is about 25,000 quid. And we went, okay, then that's what we'll do. Then we had to figure out what it would be. What we sort of needed to do to raise 25 grand. And so, yeah, we took on these physical nonsense challenges. And yeah, we very, very happily, and thanks to many, many people, we raised the money.
That's amazing. Do you have any future endeavors?
Well,
in that capacity and same breath?
Yeah, I did one, which was fun. We did one for Borne, which Rupert Graves and I got Rupert Graves thrown in a pool in Los Angeles at a Sherlock convention that I couldn't go to, but Rupert was there and they filmed it and it was lovely. And so people basically put in, we raised, a little bit of money for that. And then Laura came over to the UK and Rupert got his revenge by hurling me in a pool in Hampstead in January, which again exists somewhere on social media. So yeah, there's all sorts of little things that we'd like to do. It's just, I think talking about it, it's as ever, people would say, raising awareness is really, really key. But yeah, my wife's swimming the channel this year, as you do. Yeah, there's always some scheme. There's always some scheme, what can we do to help? Yeah, we'll see. Post-pandemic, I don't know, but yeah, there'll be something. I'm sure there always is in the ether.
It's fantastic, and it's really fantastic. I mean, when I'm about to ask the next question, it makes what the answer will be completely insignificant to all of that and what the charity is. But it's what is coming next in the future in terms of your work, because we've got the film production company set up now. I believe you've just wrapped season 3 of Sex Ed.
Yeah, we're a fledgling outfit, but we've got a brilliant development on a project. In fact, one of the first project that we've been working on for a very long time, and these things do unfortunately take time, despite the changing atmosphere of television consumption and how much is being made. That's just been pitched to all the networks in the US, which is hugely exciting. We've got some amazing partners, so we're waiting to see which home it will find its place. And it's a massively ambitious story, actually set in the Middle East. So that's very exciting, which doesn't involve terrorism. And we've just started a development deal with a company that I've worked with before, and I just have to be careful about what I say about these things.
Of course.
So yeah, that's and I love that. Building something from the ground up. That's really exciting. So yeah, there's tons going on there, which is great, and it takes time, and there's a grinding aspect to it, but that's fun. Yeah, season 3 of Sex Ed we've wrapped, and yeah, I start on Monday on something else, which again, the glorious world of NDAs. But it's but I'm collaborating with someone who I have worked with before, who may or may not have been named in this podcast, and which is really exciting, and I think it'll be out there soon enough. But I'm really, really looking forward to it. That should be really, really fun. So that's on Monday, and yeah, I'm sort of quietly trying to build a directing career as well. When I say directing career, that makes it sound a lot more glamorous than it really is. But I've directed a short which was written by Dave Kajganik, who wrote The Terror, who I work with, and just think his work is so fantastic. And he wrote it, and we shot it, and we've done it anyway, and it's now starting the festival circuit, which is quite fun. So I don't know. I mean, I think the headline through all of that is I feel an inordinate privilege and lucky to do what I do. I feel inordinately privileged to get to do what I do, in the sense that, you know, we all know, and you know as well, it's a really hyper competitive business. And despite the fact that everyone assumes that because there's so much telly out there to watch, you know, everyone is working all of the time, and that's just not the case. It's still, you know, it's still a challenge. It's still an industry built on rejection. That's the nature of it. But so when I get to do what I do, I feel very, very grateful for it. You know, because I get to do it with my tribe, and that is, you know, that's very special. And I just refuse to be cynical about it. I just won't, as ever. The point where I feel cynical and slightly bitter is the time I'll probably, you know, step back. But I just don't feel that. It all sounds terribly easy, but it isn't. You know, as ever, hard work is no substitute for anything else.
Absolutely,
that makes sense.
Of course it does. Absolutely. Now, I ask this question to every guest that comes onto the show, and I'm now very intrigued as to what you may say, having spoken to you for the hour. What does the word headstrong mean to you?
Do you know, it's interesting that when I heard the word headstrong in connection to the podcast and the word generally, the thing I didn't think of, which is the most sort of route one, which is stubborn, blah blah blah, that version of headstrong, it didn't come into my brain. Headstrong, it felt very much split into two words. You know, the strength you're feeling at any given time in your head. So it's a fairly kind of rambly answer to your question, but I was intrigued after I reflected on that. I thought, God, I really didn't think of the, you know, stubborn, know your own mind, headstrong. I thought headstrong, strength in your head, how you're feeling in your head. And the flip side of that coin means, can you be head weak? And so it felt that headstrong is a temporary word. And I think headstrong is feeling strength in your head doesn't necessarily mean that if you're not feeling strong in your head, it means you have to be feeling weak in your head. Because weak is a terrible word, physically and mentally, and it shouldn't be used. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the person who isn't feeling at their strongest. It doesn't mean that they're feeling weak. It's a dreadful word to use. So it's a very sort of semi-bullshit philosophical answer, really, but it made me think, if you're feeling strong in your head, it's not so much about it's about how you're feeling. And if you're feeling strong, I'd say sort of head confident in a way. And there are other times when you're feeling head less confident, when you may require more help, and all of those things. So it feels like headstrong is a temporary word that's an ever shifting entity that we should all, if we can, be mindful of, not only ourselves but definitely of other people. And if we can drop kick the word weak into the dustbin, I think that would be probably quite a healthy thing as well. So it's a fairly rambling, non-thought through philosophical answer, but I didn't think of headstrong as in stubborn and forthright. It just didn't occur to me, and I thought that in itself was the fact that it didn't occur to me was sort of interesting. So I'm still reflecting on the answer. So I've given you half an answer, but it's at least something.
When we next connect, I'll ask you again.
I'll go, Louis, I've got it. In one sentence.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for spending the time with me this morning. I've really enjoyed it. It's been very insightful, and you've been very, very, very open and honest, which I'm hugely appreciative of. So thank you very much for coming on to Headstrong. I wish you all the best, and to your wife on her endeavors, and your family. Yeah. Well, how exciting! What a summer ahead, by the sounds of things.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, fingers crossed. And big love to everyone else who's figuring stuff out. So, but thank you so much for having me, Louis. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to have teamed up with The Good Level, a British CBD company who share a similar ethos to that of Headstrong. The Good Level co-founders, Joe and Johnny, believe in CBD as it's helped them and their families with their physical and mental well-being. Whether that's using their balms to recover from physical exercise, or using their oils to manage stress and anxiety, or to get a better night's sleep. The Good Level has well-being at the very centre of their brand. As we've partnered up with them for this season, you can get a 15% discount off all their orders using Headstrong 15 at checkout. And if you're not sure about CBD yet, no worries. Joe and Johnny are always happy to chat and answer all your questions. You can contact them via their website or check out their Instagram at the.good.level, and that's Headstrong15 at checkout. Thank you so very much to Mr. Alistair Petrie for joining me on Headstrong. It was a really great conversation to have, and he was so very generous with his time with me. I really hope that anyone who has a spare quid, fiver, tenner, £20, please go support the charity Borne. The work that they are doing is absolutely fantastic, and I know that every pound helps these kind of charities, particularly after the challenging 18 months that we have all had. Thank you again to you, the listener, for tuning in to the podcast. If you haven't yet already, please do hit subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. It really helps me and the podcast to continue to grow and get these conversations out there to more people. Until next Monday though, thank you so much again for listening in, and stay headstrong.